At exactly 12 Soundhouse p.m., June 25, 2009, the doors of room 12 swung open. What the paramedics saw inside didn't look like the greatest entertainer of all time. It looked like a man whose body had finally given up. The king of pop, a boy from Gary, Indiana, who moonwalked his way into history, was lying silent, weight dropped to barely 112 pounds, his stomach empty, his arms marked with fresh and old injection wounds, and the iconic hair the world adored, revealed to be a wig glued onto scar tissue from decades of surgeries and that Pepsi fire no one ever forgot. Hours later, the autopsy report landed on the coroner's desk, and what it revealed was darker than any tabloid rumor. Not scandal, not gossip, but a truth so disturbing the public almost refused to believe it. And now the question the world has avoided for 15 years finally returns. What really happened in Michael Jackson's final 24 hours? The autopsy room was cold, metallic, silent, nothing like the stadiums Michael Jackson once commanded. When the sheet was pulled back, even seasoned investigators froze. This wasn't the body of a global icon. This was the body of a man who had been running from pain for far too long. The first shock came from the numbers: 51 kilograms. For someone 6 feet tall, that meant a frame stripped of muscle, stripped of flesh, stripped of everything except the outline of a life burned at both ends. His ribs were visible. His hips jutted sharply, as if the body had been starving itself not out of choice, but out of exhaustion. When the coroner opened the stomach, he expected to find food, even a small amount, from the night before. Instead, he found almost nothing. No vegetables, no bread, no protein. Only a single dissolving pill and traces of liquid medication. This man, who once moonwalked across the world stage, had gone into his last day with a stomach that was essentially empty. Then came the arms. Both forearms were marked with clusters of injection sites, some fresh, some faded, some punctured, so many times the skin itself was scarred. This wasn't recreational drug use. These were medical-grade injections from weeks, maybe months, of sedation attempts. The pattern told a story the world refused to hear. Michael wasn't chasing a high. He was chasing sleep, a basic human necessity that his body no longer understood how to achieve. But perhaps the most heartbreaking detail came from the scalp. When the coroners examined the head, they found what many had whispered about since the Pepsi commercial fire in 1984. The burns had never fully healed. The skin was scarred, tense, uneven. Where hair should have grown naturally, technicians instead found a carefully applied wig grafted directly to the damaged tissue using medical adhesive. Under the bright lights of the autopsy room, the illusion dissolved, revealing decades of physical pain hidden beneath. Hats, wigs, and silk curtains of stage hair. Moving down the torso, another revelation: multiple fractured ribs. But these weren't the result of injury before death. They came from the desperate attempts of paramedics trying to revive him, pressing hard on a chest that was already too fragile, too thin, too weak to withstand the force. One investigator later said privately, "This wasn't a superstar's body. This was the body of a man pushed past the limit of survival." And that is the truth the autopsy exposed. Michael Jackson didn't die in a moment. He had been dying slowly, silently, long before June 25th. His body was a battlefield, and the final 24 hours were only the last blow. If the autopsy revealed what happened physically, then the 60 days before his death revealed why. Every dancer from the This Is It rehearsals said the same thing. Michael was not sleeping. Not a little, not poorly, not at all. His personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, later admitted under oath that Michael had gone weeks without a single minute of natural sleep. His body could lie down, his eyes could close, but his mind never slipped into unconsciousness. It was as if insomnia had become a prison he couldn't escape. During rehearsals at the Staples Center, witnesses described a disturbing contrast. Backstage, he looked fragile, hands trembling, voice thin, sometimes needing help to walk down a short hallway. His eyes appeared glassy, unfocused, as if his brain was fighting gravity. But the moment he stepped onto the stage, something else took over. The spotlight hit him, and suddenly the shaking stopped. The voice strengthened, the movements sharpened. For a brief moment each night, he became Michael Jackson again, a title as heavy as it was revered. But as soon as rehearsals ended, the illusion shattered. Crew members said he would often slump into a chair, breathing heavily, sweat dripping down his back, whispering that he needed to sleep or he wouldn't make it to opening night. Then came the sentence that still chills those who heard it. "They're going to kill me. I feel it." Michael said this not once, but multiple times, to dancers, to friends, even to family. Some believed he meant the industry. Some thought he meant the pressure. Some feared he meant someone specific, but no one knew exactly whom he was afraid of. Rumors began to spread among the security team about an unknown visitor who arrived unannounced on the night of June 24th, just hours before he died. The visitor was escorted upstairs and stayed for less than 30 minutes. Their name was never recorded publicly. The visit was never included in the final timeline. To this day, fans debate who it was and why they came so late. Behind the scenes, the medical reality was spiraling. Michael had been begging for sleep medications, and when pills no longer worked, he pleaded for propofol, a hospital anesthetic used only for surgery. Imagine the desperation required for someone to ask to be put under just to rest for a few hours. That level of exhaustion is not normal. It is catastrophic. In phone records later examined by investigators, Michael sent a message to a close confidant just days before he died. "My mind won't shut off. I'm scared to close my eyes." Combine that with the intense rehearsals, the mounting pressure for the upcoming 50-show residency, and the reality that his body was barely functioning, and a darker truth emerges. Michael wasn't living the last 60 days of his life. He was surviving them. Every night he walked on stage during rehearsals, he looked like a ghost wearing his own legacy. Every morning he woke up, he looked one day closer to collapse. And he knew it. He said it. He predicted it. The world just wasn't ready to listen. The night before Michael Jackson left this world, he gave what witnesses still describe as the most electrifying rehearsal of his final decade. Staples Center, Los Angeles, June 24, 2009. A cavernous arena filled only with dancers, lighting crews, and technicians who had spent weeks watching Michael struggle through fatigue. But on this night, something changed. At 8:30 p.m., he stepped onto the stage with a steadiness no one had seen in weeks. The lights dimmed, the orchestra swelled, and Michael delivered the full choreography of "They Don't Care About Us" with razor-sharp movements. To those watching, it felt like a resurrection, as if the man who had been trembling backstage had suddenly become the legend again. Footage from that night would later be used in the This Is It documentary, immortalizing the moment. But witnesses say the camera didn't capture everything. They noticed how Michael leaned on the railing while climbing a short staircase, how he paused longer than usual before taking positions, how he pressed his palm to his ribs after a dance break. But when the music started, he transformed. He rehearsed until 11:45 p.m., pushing through complex vocal lines and footwork that would exhaust performers half his age. The dancers cheered. Kenny Ortega, the tour's director, said Michael found a spark that had been missing for weeks. Even the security team, who had grown used to escorting a fatigued figure to his car, felt a flicker of hope. As he walked off stage for the final time, he turned to one of the dancers, offered a faint smile, a rare, gentle smile, and said the last public words he would ever speak. "We must be perfect tomorrow." His voice was soft, determined, almost pleading. From there, he headed to his waiting vehicle. Witnesses say the moment he stepped off the solid stage and onto the concrete walkway, the transformation faded. His posture shifted. His shoulders slumped. One guard later described it as watching a balloon slowly losing air. When he reached home at 12:15 a.m., he was visibly exhausted. He did not, Eat dinner. He did not change clothes immediately. He only said one thing to the staff member who greeted him. "I have to sleep. I have to be ready." Those words would echo through the entire investigation because they weren't just a statement of pressure. They were desperation. Michael knew his body couldn't handle another day without rest, and after weeks of insomnia, the night of June 24th would become the tipping point, the moment where exhaustion crossed into crisis. What happened between 1:30 a.m. and 5 a.m. is not speculation. It is documented in sworn court testimony, medical logs, and statements given under oath. At 1:30 a.m., Michael told Dr. Conrad Murray he still could not sleep. The rehearsal had pushed his adrenaline dangerously high, but when the rush faded, the insomnia hit with double force. Murray claimed he tried calming techniques, breathing exercises, milk, conversation. But Michael paced the room, restless, terrified, whispering, "If I don't sleep, I won't make it through tomorrow." At 2 a.m., Murray administered lorazepam, a sedative prescribed to help calm the mind. In a typical patient, the dose he gave would lead to deep rest. But Michael remained awake, eyes open, breathing fast, hands moving restlessly over the bedsheets. By 3 a.m., Michael was more distressed. Murray gave midazolam, another sedative. Again, no sleep. Medical experts would later testify that the amount of medication he received between 1:30 and 3:30 a.m. was enough to sedate a healthy adult into unconsciousness. But Michael did not react normally. His body had been exposed to prolonged stress, weeks of insomnia, and layers of medications intended to force rest. At that point, normal responses no longer applied. Multiple witnesses, including the investigation team, confirmed Michael began saying something repeatedly. "If I don't sleep, I'll die," not theatrically, not dramatically, but with the clarity of someone who genuinely believed it. And perhaps he was right. Because by 4 a.m., the exhaustion had turned into panic. He sat up in bed, shaking, saying he felt both awake and disconnected, the kind of mental fog that comes from being awake far longer than the body was designed for. Murray claimed that during these hours, Michael begged him for propofol, the surgical anesthetic he had used on previous nights to achieve deep, temporary rest. Nurses and medical experts would later insist this was a red flag. Propofol is not a sleep aid. It is a hospital-grade sedative meant for operating rooms with full monitoring equipment. But Michael was not thinking about risk. He was thinking about surviving the next day. The pressure of 50 shows, the investment, the cameras, the comeback the world was waiting for. At 5 a.m., after hours of failed attempts, Michael reportedly said the words Murray repeated in court. "Just make me sleep. I need to sleep." By then, the sun was rising over Los Angeles, and the night had turned into something far more dangerous than insomnia. It had turned into surrender. There is a gap in the timeline between 5:30 a.m. and 10:40 a.m. that investigators call the missing hours. What is known is that Michael never fell into meaningful sleep. He drifted in and out, but his mind did not shut off, not even once. By mid-morning, Michael was still awake. Just after 10:30 a.m., Murray made a decision that would become the center of global controversy. He prepared a small amount of propofol, explaining later in testimony that he believed it would give Michael 15 minutes of rest. He insisted it was a light dose, a bridge to natural sleep. But anesthesiologists worldwide would later testify, even a small amount of propofol requires full monitoring equipment, oxygen backup, and a controlled environment. Michael's bedroom had none of that. At 10:40 a.m., Murray administered the dose. The room was quiet, curtains drawn, an IV line hanging loosely from a portable stand, a simple pulse monitor on the nightstand, not attached properly, no oxygen tank, no emergency equipment, just a doctor, a patient, and a substance meant for operating rooms. Within moments, Michael's breathing slowed. His body relaxed. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he looked peaceful. At 10:50 a.m., Murray claimed he noticed Michael had become too quiet. He called his name, No response. He checked his pulse. Nothing. Investigators later learned something critical. Levin was not called immediately. There was a delay, long enough to raise questions, long enough for speculation, long enough for the world to wonder why. Some reports say Murray attempted to revive him alone. Some say he looked for help. Some say he was in shock, unable to process what was unfolding. But what is undisputed is this. When paramedics arrived, they found a room that looked more like an improvised recovery space than a medical setup. An IV bag hanging from a closet pole, scattered medical supplies, and a patient who had not been breathing for an unknown period of time. At 11:26 a.m., Michael Jackson was officially transported to UCLA Medical Center. Despite every effort, the outcome was already set. Hours later, the autopsy report would describe the physical state of the man the world thought they knew. A body exhausted, a mind overwhelmed, a legend carrying more weight than his frame could endure. And standing behind all of it was a question still debated today. Was Michael Jackson's final day a medical failure, or the inevitable collapse of a man pushed beyond human limits? This is the part of the story that investigators still can't agree on. The 30-minute window between the moment Michael stopped responding and the moment anyone finally picked up a phone. According to Dr. Conrad Murray's earliest statement, he noticed Michael slipping into distress around 11:40 a.m. But phone records tell a different story. They show Murray making a series of calls, not to emergency services, but to multiple personal contacts. One lasted 11 minutes, another lasted 3. A third call connected right before noon. Not one of them was 911. Those calls became the first of many contradictions in Murray's timeline, and it forced detectives to consider a possibility darker than negligence, that instead of seeking help immediately, someone in that room was trying to manage the situation quietly. Security staff later testified that when they entered the room, Murray was not on the phone with paramedics. He was moving around the bedside area, gathering items, unplugging equipment. One guard described it as organizing, another called it clearing space, but the police wrote a different phrase into their notes: possible cleanup. Nothing illegal was confirmed, but the inconsistency between what Murray said and what the staff witnessed created a storm of questions that would never be fully resolved. Then came the rumor that exploded across fan forums: an unidentified visitor seen near the hallway shortly before the 911 call. The guest was allegedly escorted inside the house the night before and seen again just after noon on the 25th. No report ever confirmed who this person was or what they were doing there. Their name never appeared in the official documents. But the idea that someone entered or exited the room during the critical window became one of the most persistent theories surrounding Michael's final hours. EMT logs would later show that when paramedics finally walked into bedroom 12, the room didn't look like an active emergency. The lighting was dim, the equipment looked partially disconnected. The IV line was still attached, but not running properly. And the bottle of propofol, the drug at the center of the case, was not immediately visible. As one detective put it, the room didn't match the story. What happened inside that half hour? Why didn't Murray call for help at the first sign of distress? And what exactly was removed or moved before first responders arrived? Those questions form a void, a 30-minute blank space that fans now call the half hour of darkness. At 12:21 p.m., the world's most disturbing phone call was finally made. Not by Murray, not by a nurse, not by anyone with medical training. It was made by a security guard who had sprinted upstairs after being summoned. His voice trembled, his breathing shook. "He's not breathing," he told the dispatcher, and although he tried to remain calm, the fear in the room leaked through every word. The dispatcher asked whether CPR had begun, and the guard said yes. But again, paramedics would later tell investigators that the CPR technique being used was ineffective on a soft surface and should have begun much sooner. And then came the line that still echoes through the recording: "We have a doctor here, but he's just asking us to get help." To emergency specialists, that sentence was chilling. Why wasn't the doctor taking control? Why wasn't he the one on the phone? Why did someone else have to describe what was happening? When paramedics rushed into the room, they expected commotion, urgent commands, frantic attempts to save a life. Instead, they found a scene that felt strangely still. Michael lay motionless on the floor. His skin cool, no responsiveness, no pupil reaction. To the trained eye, it looked as if a significant amount of time had already passed. EMTs worked on him anyway. They always do. But privately, one of them later admitted, it didn't look like a fresh emergency. As they carried him down the stairs, the house was eerily quiet, except for the echoes of instructions barked by paramedics fighting a losing battle. By the time they reached the ambulance, they knew the outcome was already written. Fans would replay the 911 call for years, dissecting every hesitation, every pause, every voice in the background. They pointed out the calmness of the caller, the absence of urgency from the doctor, the odd silences that punctuated the call. Investigators didn't say much, but one retired detective summarized it bluntly during a documentary. Help was called, just not soon enough. And that is the true horror of the 911 call. Not the panic you hear, but the minutes of silence before it. When news broke on the afternoon of June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson is gone. The world reacted the same way it had reacted when Elvis died, when Lennon died, when Mercury died. Shock, disbelief, the rush to explain the unexplainable. Within 30 minutes, TV anchors were saying the words, possible overdose. Commentators speculated about the drugs, about the doctor, about the comeback tour. They talked about the cause. They talked about the dosage. They talked about the timing. But no one, not one network, not one headline, talked about the condition of the man who died in that bed. Because the real shock didn't come from the reason. The real shock came from the state he was in. The autopsy report, when finally made public, carried no drama, no sensational theory, just something colder, blunter, more devastating. A clinical portrait of a man whose body had been pushed past its biological limits. Michael Jackson, the boy who electrified Motown at age 11, the man who performed for presidents and monarchs, died weighing barely 112 pounds. His stomach was empty, except for medication. His hairline was fused to old scar tissue from the 1984 accident. His body bore signs of exhaustion, chronic inflammation, and long-term sleep deprivation. The world imagined a superstar collapsing like in a scene from a movie. But the truth was more heartbreaking and far more human. Michael Jackson died as a man who had nothing left to give. The coroner's description made it painfully clear. His heart had been strong for years, but stress had hollowed him out. His muscles had atrophied. His immune system was weakened. His sleep cycle had become almost non-existent. His mind had been running on fumes. This was not the body of a man preparing for 50 concerts. This was the body of a man who had been quietly fading behind the curtain while the world fixated on choreography and ticket sales. For decades, Michael gave his life to the stage, but the autopsy showed the stage gave very little back. And then came the most heartbreaking line in the report, the line that changed the meaning of his death entirely. Signs consistent with severe and prolonged physical stress. Not drugs, not scandal, not a single night of bad decisions, but a lifetime of pressure no one could survive forever. Fans cried because a legend died suddenly. Doctors cried because a human being had died slowly. In the weeks after, medical experts explained something the public had never truly understood. Sleep isn't optional. Sleep isn't a luxury. And the kind of insomnia Michael endured, the kind that required a surgical anesthetic just to close his eyes, was the kind of condition that slowly dismantles every system in the body. It changes mood. It destroys balance. It distorts memory. It destabilizes the heart. It breaks a person from the inside. Michael wasn't just tired. He was deteriorating. Behind the music, behind the fame, behind the every note must be perfect rehearsals of "This is it," was a man fighting to hold himself together while the world demanded the version of him they remembered from 1983. The autopsy didn't read like the ending of a scandal. It read like a report on a war and the body of a soldier who never stopped fighting. And that leads to the most chilling truth of all, spoken quietly by one of the coroners. Michael Jackson did not die on the stage. He died in isolation. He died not surrounded by dancers or cheering fans, but in a bedroom with no applause, no spotlight, no music, just the steady unraveling of someone who had carried an impossible crown for far too long. So, could Michael have lived? Could this ending have been avoided? The documentary now rewinds. It traces the final 60 days, the final rehearsals, the warnings, the cracks in his voice, the tremors in his hands, the schedule that no ordinary person could endure. Doctors say yes, if Michael had been able to sleep naturally. Real sleep, not chemically induced unconsciousness. If he had slept the way the average human sleeps, 6 hours, 5 hours, even 4, his brain, heart, and nervous system might have had the resilience to survive the pressure he was under. But he hadn't slept properly in weeks. Some say months. One investigator called it a sleep drought that no body could withstand. Others argue the schedule itself was a death sentence. 8-hour rehearsals, fully choreographic sets, daily meetings, pressure to be perfect because perfection was the only thing the world ever allowed him to be. The harsh truth? Michael was working with an intensity that would have pushed even a healthy 25-year-old to the edge. For a 50-year-old man who hadn't slept, it was catastrophic. Then comes the third branch of the debate, the one that still sparks arguments online every June 25th. What if Michael had been treated in a real medical facility instead of a bedroom? Propofol, the drug used to sedate him, is never meant for home use. Its dosage requires monitoring equipment found only in hospitals. Its effects require multiple professionals in the room. Fans argue that no matter how well-intentioned, administering it outside a medical environment made the situation inherently unsafe. Some call it a medical tragedy. Some call it avoidable. Others call it the true cost of fame. And then there are the fans, millions of them, who believe something simpler but far more brutal. He was worked to death. Not by a villain, not by a conspiracy, but by a system that had become addicted to Michael's greatness, a system that saw him not as a fragile human being, but as an infinite resource, a voice that would never crack, feet that would never slow, a legend whose body was expected to obey the myth. His comeback wasn't just a tour, it was an avalanche. And Michael, desperately wanting to reclaim his reputation, wanting to prove himself one more time, ran straight into it. The unanswered question at the end of every documentary, every investigation, every fan tribute remains the same. If Michael had slept, if Michael had rested, if someone had protected him instead of pushing him, would the King of Pop still be alive today? There is no single answer, but there is a single truth. Michael Jackson didn't die because of one mistake. He died because of years of pressure, exhaustion, and isolation that built up into a breaking point no one recognized until it was too late. And maybe, just maybe, the real tragedy isn't that Michael is gone. The real tragedy is that the world didn't see he was disappearing long before June 25th. When the world heard that Michael Jackson had died, people immediately reached for the simplest explanation. Overdose, doctor error, bad medication. But the autopsy told a different, far more devastating story, one that stripped away the headlines and exposed the quiet truth of his final years. The King of Pop didn't just collapse, he deteriorated. His body weighed barely 112 pounds. His stomach was empty except for medication. His arm showed numerous injection marks, some old, some recent. His scalp revealed burns from the 1984 accident, covered by a wig fused to scar tissue. His muscles were thin, his immune system weakened, his organs exhausted. This wasn't the body of a man preparing for 50 concerts. It was the body of a man pushed far beyond human limits. Doctors said his condition looked like prolonged physical stress. Paramedics said the scene felt like a man whose body had been fighting for far too long. And for the first time, the public saw what those closest to him had quietly feared. Michael wasn't living like a superstar. He was living like someone trying to survive his own fame. The shock wasn't how he died. It was realizing how much of him had already vanished long before June 25th. The world thought they lost a king in one afternoon. The autopsy showed they'd been losing him for years. And then came the line that redefined everything. Michael didn't die on stage. He died in isolation. A man adored by billions left this world alone, not in the glow of spotlights, but in a silent bedroom, far from the sound of applause he spent his life chasing. 15 years later, the same question still divides the world. Could Michael Jackson have lived? Doctors say yes, if he had been able to sleep normally. Real sleep, not chemically induced unconsciousness. Weeks of insomnia broke his nervous system. No human body can survive that. If he had slept even a few hours consistently, his heart, brain, and immune system may have withstood the pressure of rehearsals. Others argue the schedule alone was impossible. 8 hours of dancing a day, full choreography run-throughs, meetings, costume fittings, travel, press, negotiations, a calendar built for a machine, not a 50-year-old man. If the rehearsals had been lighter, if the tour had fewer dates, if he'd been given time to recover. Maybe. Then there's the third theory, the one that burns hottest among fans. He should have been treated in a hospital, not a bedroom. Propofol isn't a sleep aid. It's meant for surgical rooms, monitored by multiple professionals, surrounded by equipment that can respond within seconds. Administering it at home wasn't just risky. It created a situation where a single misstep could be fatal. And so the debate splits into two camps. Some call it a medical accident, others call it a man worked into exhaustion. But both sides agree on one painful truth. Michael wasn't protected. He was 50 years old. He hadn't slept. He was under pressure to deliver the biggest comeback in music history. And he was surrounded by people who needed him to perform, not rest. The question isn't whether he was talented enough. The question is whether anyone around him ever told him to stop. In the end, the tragedy of Michael Jackson's final hours is alarmingly simple. His death wasn't sudden. It was the final step in a long, slow collapse no one dared to interrupt. And that's why the question will never die. Was this fate, or was this preventable? Tell me what you believe really happened, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the truths this industry still tries to bury.